yeah, I'm just like working on. I just started working on a show that I want to make. I'm just doing it by myself. And yeah, I've worked on some TV shows. I'm working on a game right now. Not my own thing, just like someone else's. It's like yeah, I won't plug it, but yeah, I can't really talk about it. But yeah, and I've made, and then I started out making comics. I started out on Tumblr and tried to make a few different like web comics and stuff like that. Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, I remember I first learned about your stuff through your Tumblr stuff back when you were working. Whoa, how long ago was it? 2014, 2015? When you were like really pushing. What was it at the time? Not Gloria. Gloria was more recent.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, I've been peeping your stuff since long time ago, and I think we started talking around 2 years ago, proper. Yeah, 2020, I think.
Actually, talking more regularly. Yeah, I remember you from Tumblr though, definitely. Like you were drawing. I feel like it was earlier, dude. I started posting on Tumblr in 2011, and I feel like you were like I became aware of your account at least not long after that. I feel like it was longer.
Nah, I think I started really catching my own, like as an artist. When did I start drawing? 2014 was when I actually properly started like learning how to draw and make art.
Oh, okay. Okay, word.
So
Yeah,
it was probably like 2016.
There was a point where when I like saw your art and followed you back on Tumblr.
Yeah.
So I remember it. You were you working on Boxcar City?
Super early drafts way back in the day. 2019 is when I did like proper work for Boxcar City, but 2016 is when I started my first draft of that comic and put it up on Tumblr. And then I cut that project short, decided to rework it, and then I made it to what it is right now currently.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you said you were working on a project, your personal project right now, and I know what it is, but like you just introduce it as a personal project, but if you can introduce people to that thing.
Well, I'm wondering what you think of it. Like, what's because I'm at a point where I won't get into it, but we will get into it. But like, what would you say that it is? Because it's like I have a hard time describing it. I call it an action horror anime, but that doesn't feel quite right. That doesn't communicate all the shit that's in it, you know?
So, Cassandra Complex is the name of the project that you're working on, and you're updating it on the Lamb of God Studio handle online. And how would I describe it currently? It's right now there are a lot of vignettes that you're posting about it, not actually anything with like plot, just a lot of character designs and thematic illustrations. And I'd say it would be, I think it's closer to psychological horror as a thing.
Yeah,
or
definitely.
thriller. It has thriller elements too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I really love police procedurals and like um and yeah, horror, but like where horror, but it's like realistic and like there's like police trying to stop it from happening, you know, stop the madness and like stuff like that.
Yeah,
Trying to
it's
stop criminals who are like killing people, like serious life and death stuff. No Country for Old Men, you know, there's lots of examples. A huge inspiration, and you said psychological horror. A huge inspiration of it is like Hannibal. Kind
oh
of
yeah.
obviously,
I see a
like
lot of
the
Hannibal,
shoot.
especially in like that one illustration you did of the hospital bed,
Yeah,
and the other one with the exposed scalp and like brain
yeah.
carapace on it. Yeah,
I'm kind of trying to obviously like evoke it, and like It is. You're right that it's a lot of like just more like dramatic points in the story, but like the brain one, for example, is like that's like a metaphorical. Like that doesn't happen. I have like three different versions of like the outline written. I haven't written very much like of the actual scenes, but like the outline of the plot is like written in a version that I'm happy with, and that doesn't happen at all at any point. But it's psychological because he like manipulates her to do something, so that image is like representative of it.
Okay,
And
so it's like
like
a metaphorical piece.
yeah,
Then yeah, no, I
yeah,
appreciate that.
but like the one of Naomi in the hospital bed, like that's a part that happens in the story. Like, well, I won't get into what the story is, but Dave and Jack there. I don't. This is the thing is, I was talking to one of my friends recently, and he didn't. I don't think he fully bought or was sold on like the fact that they're police in that one where they're in the forest. Like he was like he didn't know what was going on, and I was like, oh, it's like a crime scene, and they're police, and they're taking pictures of the car. But
Okay.
yeah, we were talking about this before the show started about like trying to like I don't know elevate your art or plus it more like so that it has a story and that it has meaning.
Yeah,
And that's
to put
one thing
characters in
that
context. Yep.
yeah, and I've noticed you started to do that like a lot too, and I just thought it was like so sick to like still have the classical sensibility to have like meaning in your drawings, but like they're super stylized too. Like they're modernist drawings. Like I can't say that the drawing style is classical, like because it's not. It's like modernist. It's like
Yeah,
interesting
I
how,
think
like
the
what,
classical element is the narrative that I'm trying to push for my own things. But other than that, I do whatever I can personally, and I like looking at people's things like that too, where people are pushing their own unique aesthetics into like a more classical structure to really elevate, the project that they're working on.
Mhm.
There's
So
a
sorry, I just wanted to not to cut you off. Go ahead.
no, there's this artist actually on Twitter that I highly recommend people check out. His name is Hiro Tonfa, Hiro space Tonfa at Hiro Tonfa, and he does this Twitter webcomic. He's also on Webtoons called Blue Rivers. What was it? Blue Rivers Ransom, or let me check. BRR is the abbreviation for it, and it's a bunch of alternate history modern warfare where like America is like going to like actual frontline combat, and he's super inspired by a lot of World War II and like alternate history takes, and he does like really interesting things with his characters. Like his characters were like cute girls for the longest time, but he wanted to add like his own unique context to it, and he does a very successful job at like making an engaging war story with new characters, and that's what I like. I tend to like creators like that, where they're trying to push their aesthetic, but also tell unique stories with it. And just to loop it back around to Cassandra Complex, I'm looking at a lot of what you're putting around and trying to like evoke narrative in your story, and I'm really super interested in what you're pushing at the moment.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm worried that I won't be happy with it in a few years. And once you do a project for a long time, you look at the earlier stuff, and it's like really rough. And you're like, should
Oh,
I go? This with a bunch of people that I know. It's like you feel like, should I go back and fix it so the whole thing is like more consistent, or like what? And
no.
I don't know. At this point, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that I stay like happy because this is the style that I'm trying to do is like not that hard. It's not fully realistic. There's a lot of like simplification and kind of Bruce Timm like breaking it down, bringing a character down into like blocks.
Yeah, the shape language is super strong in your work too.
Yeah,
kind of.
well, your stuff is like really like that too. Like your stuff is like the thing I love is like you still allow it to have these like human like little like details in the line art. Like you leave your sketches, a lot of your sketches on it, which is which I love absolutely, and I try to do. I'm kind of OCD, so I take out most of them, but I try to leave like pieces of the sketch in like the finals, which you do like amazingly. You've I feel like have you started to do that more? Like just
Yeah,
loosen up when
yeah.
you know.
Lately, I've been sketching a lot less actually. When you see every single drawing that I've done recently, it's mostly done in one go. I don't redo drawings. I don't. Well, okay, that's not entirely true. What I will do is I'll draw from beginning to end. If I don't like the drawing, I'll just redo it from scratch. I won't
Yeah,
reuse anything, or I won't reuse a sketch or a pose or anything like that. If I don't like it, I don't like it. I need to do something new.
yeah.
And
I feel like that's the best way to do it. I mean, it ends up with me redoing drawings like almost all the drawings that I'm actually happy with. I've redrawn like 10 times.
yeah, that's kind of the nature of things when you do it like that. But you learn to make art faster, and that's the whole reason why I started to do this exercise of just doing everything in one go.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you. I feel you. At my well, in my day job, I do that for sure. Like, just I'm working. I can't say this. I'm working on like animations on like a fighting game right now.
Oh, dope, nice.
And, like, just like my day job, and like it's I've never worked on like a fighting game before, but I'm a fan of Muriel Cartwright Kanuko. She was like the
Oh
lead
yeah, yeah,
animator.
yeah, yeah. For Skullgirls,
On,
yeah, no, she was like, yeah, I've done some work for Skullgirls way back in the day, actually,
yeah,
and
she has a really sick like GDC talk on character animation for fighting games, and
mhm.
I remember seeing that a while ago when it came out, basically, and he I remember thinking, damn, that would be really sick. Like, and I like Spaz Kid and Jeff. They're making what is that game? The Cops, Nightmare
Nightmare
Cops.
Cops, yeah, on Newgrounds.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a fan of that too, and so I'm finally. But this is actually the first time I've ever um, worked on a game, a fighting game like that. And so it's just moves. It's just characters running, jumping, kicking, doing different like attacks, different and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, it's kind of interesting to like learn how they're doing it because they do it straight from Harmony to Unity, or what's the? It's like a game engine.
So Unity is a game engine, so you guys are working in Unity, I assume?
Well, they take. I don't know how exactly it works, but they're gonna take like the animations we do in
Mm-hmm.
Harmony and like put them in Unity, so you can like swap out like parts of the characters and
Oh,
like
that's...
customize them and stuff like that.
Oh, so do you have, like, models that you're rigging, I assume? For that
Oh
type of...
yeah. Well,
Okay.
they're like rigs in Harmony, but it's mostly hand drawn actually because like the roughs have to be like you have to do what's called tie down, which is like when you do rough animation, it's just like the anatomy, but tie down is like a tighter drawing, a tighter of one of the keys, one of the key poses, and those take a while because I don't know, just they're sprites technically, but they're like mad detailed. They're in this kind of like I don't know comic book style, like Joe Kubert style,
Oh,
like
that's sick.
American comic book. It looks kind of like an older American comic. Um, but yeah, I had never worked on a game before, and that's pretty interesting.
I know I personally want to do, like, a beat 'em up style game, kind of like Nightmare Cops, actually. In the future, it's just... There's a lot of work that goes into making a game, especially making animations for a game like that. Which I'm sure you're, like... Just for a fighting game, oh, man, how many, like, thousands of frames of animation you gotta do for just one character?
Well, have you heard of Paul Robertson?
Yeah, love Paul Robertson stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Like I remember seeing like the Pirate Baby one, the animation, his long ass animation he did like like a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
About and all the one he made a bunch of other ones, but they're animations, but they're like it's hard to describe. It's like a fighting game. It's like a pixel fighting game but it's all crazy and fucking hectic and violent and nuts. Like they're
if people want to find this,
kind of hard to describe.
It's Pirate Baby's Cabana Battle from way back in the day, and I highly recommend if people are interested in Paul Robertson. Most people would know Paul Robertson from the Scott Pilgrim versus the World game, but he's done a bunch of like stuff. He's like a very prolific artist, unique sprite artist and animator. Pirate Baby's Cabana. It's pretty much a beat 'em up. Paul Robertson loves beat 'em ups. He has like that huge like River City Ransom vibes / Metal Slug. Paul Robertson also worked on a game called Mercenary Kings a little while afterwards, which is like a mix of Monster Hunter and Metal Slug. He's just like one of like the best sprite artists that are like currently working at the moment.
Yeah, I'm watching it right now. Pirate Baby's Cabana Battle Street Fight 2006.
Yep,
full on YouTube, and it's insane. It's so insane. It's it's hard to describe.
It has that Jonan or Vasquez style almost, but it's like super unique. It has that, I don't know how to describe it other than it's very mid 2000s.
Yeah, it's hard to describe. It's like insane. Like I remember the reason I got reminded of this is like I remember seeing this. I probably saw this when I was like 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have been 12 or 13 in 2006, and like, oh my god, dude, he's just like walking down the table. Now, for people who are listening, he's like walking down this long ass school table, and he's just blowing people's heads off with Uzis.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. Yeah,
he gets to the end of the desk, and they like. Oh my god, this is
the gore is ridiculous in it, yeah, and it's all like black and white.
Yeah, in like 6th grade, and being like, yo, I would love to do something like this, because you can kind of see how he did it. Like he reuses a lot of the animations.
Yeah,
if you just make a ton of those and reuse them, you can like stretch it out like this.
Yeah, you can tell a story with reused assets, and a lot of games like do a lot of that stuff. I'm pretty certain he learned a lot from old arcade games and beat 'em ups where it's just characters moving around the screen. And
yeah, but you know what the thing is? His shit is like way more advanced even. He like elevated it, you know what I mean?
Oh, 100%.
It's way more detailed. And it's like it's also like way more edgy than anything you'd see in like an arcade, you know?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it translates into like it's a new art form pretty much. And he's been doing really, really good stuff since then. I mean, dude deserves it. He's like super hardworking. Like you can see the level of detail and passion that goes into like every single one of those like sprites and animations. Even the setting too.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before the show about like being able to show impact in your animation. And it's a hard thing to get across, but Paul Robertson really has that. He has a very like when something gets hit or something explodes or something happens in it, you really feel it like physically. Whereas some other stuff you don't really get a sense of that from like the motion. But he's really good at it, and it's a lot. It just has a lot to do with like it's honestly just like a lot of like camera stuff, like you were saying, Gens. Mm-hmm. But just knowing how to use that camera and do like camera shakes when something like hits something and stuff like that. makes a lot of difference. Makes a big old difference.
It takes a lot of practice too. You can't just be. People need to be more willing to experiment with camera, is what I feel. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. So, if people want to see more impact in things, they just gotta break out of their comfort zone and actually attempt for it. I do got a friend. I mentioned my friend before too. Shout out to Keith Garces on Newgrounds. Keith, Garces is the last name. Because if you look at his stuff, or anyone that's listening, he does a lot of camera moves. I would say over 70% of his animations are pretty much camera. And it sells so much motion. It's really cool stuff. And I do want to work with Keith in the future, actually. He worked on a game, actually, with his brother on Newgrounds called Rushdown Rivals, which is just a bunch of like legacy characters from Newgrounds in a beat-em-up style fighting game, like arcade style. And it's a really fun game. We were talking about, like, you know, just earlier, doing designs for animation for fighting games, and him and his brother have been working for like a year plus, no, 2 years now on that game, on their free time. And it's genuinely impressive, like, how good that game feels whenever you're moving around or actually hitting things. And they got that sense of kinetic energy down with their animation, specifically Keith, because Keith is the one that's doing the art. His brother is doing the programming for it, but like they have a good flow together.
Yeah, I feel like that makes it more satisfying when you're playing a game.
Yeah, no, when the button shows like good like impact and you can see it happening on screen with the good camera shakes and everything, I'm very excited to see what they do in the future. And hopefully, again, I do want to work with them on something in the future. So Keith, if you're listening to this right now, just like, you know, your days are numbered. I got to get them on the show too. I promised them that too, but that's in the future.
Well, it kind of reminds me of cinematography, which I was hoping to chop it up with you about. I know we both like cinematography a lot, and we're like fixated on it. But do you have like other? Did you make questions, or was it just going to be like convo?
Oh, this is mostly just conversation. I do have questions I can ask towards the end, but like, if we get into it right now, it doesn't even matter. I can just like cut the questions. You don't gotta worry. But when you were saying cinematography, what were you thinking about?
Well, like well, just like stuff that you like in cinematography. Like what in particular do you like a more, like, I guess, restrained style where the director's not very showy, or like something in between?
Okay, so what I personally prefer is this is going to go to me. I'm going to ask you the same question actually, but for me, I like a lot of more reserved camera, more still camera shots. A lot of my inspirations come from French New Wave cinema from the 1960s. Jean-Luc Godard is one of my favorite directors, and as a cinematographer, he's also he likes to pan the camera as far away from the characters as possible, or whenever characters are in the scene, they're framed in such a way where they're kind of accentuated in the frame. There's also another film that I take a lot of inspiration from. I'm trying to remember the cinematographer for it, but the movie was called Fallen Angels, 1995, by Jean Carway.
Or you actually told me about that one, like, I don't know, earlier this year, and I checked it out, and it was fucking mind blowing, dude.
Yeah, it's I learned a lot from that movie. What'd you say?
I was surprised that I hadn't heard of it earlier because it was so good. Like,
yeah,
it's like a Chinese film, right?
Yeah, it's a Hong Kong film. The cinematographer was Christopher Doyle, and he is a phenomenal cameraman. What else did he work on? I'm trying to like remember all his films, like the big films that he worked on. Uh,
Well, like you were saying before, I really do love stuff that is like there's a lot of wide shots where
yeah,
it shows like his whole body, and you know if there's two people talking, then it would show them from like 20 feet away or something like wide shots. Like there's a bunch of directors who use that a lot, but I don't know, I like it, and especially when it's like you were saying, like it's mannered, like I don't know. I guess the really like exaggerated version of this would be like uh what's his name? The Fantastic Mr. Fox and like
oh,
Life
Wes
Aquatic.
Anderson went. Yeah.
Wes Anderson, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, like Wes Anderson would be the most exaggerated version of it. But
Mhm.
other people do it really sick, and it's fucking sick. Nicholas Winding Refn, I know you know
Mhm,
Refn, does
mhm,
that too all the time. It's like his compositions are like autistically like symmetrical and like they're just like perfectly composed, like almost mathematically. You know what I mean?
yeah. Uh,
With regards to with regards to like the rule of thirds and like just like clear staging. If you watch a Refn film like Drive or Only God Forgives or Neon Demon, they're all like that. And I don't know, I like both of them. I tend to like stuff like that
Same here.
as far as camera work. But oh yeah, this is what made me want to talk about cinematography is like I was thinking of like Lynn Ramsey. She's
Oh yeah,
like this
yeah.
yeah, like have you seen her films?
Mm-hmm.
Like We Need to Talk About Kevin and You Were Never Really Here.
Yep. You Were Never Really Here was the one that we talked about actually a little while ago, I think.
Or yeah, it's like really restrained, super restrained camera work. But there's like I don't know 2 or 3 points at the where it's like handheld, or there's one part where it's like on the door, on the car door. So like, and I really love that. And there's a shot like that in Killing Them Softly as well, and it's just so fucking sick. This is really like esoteric to talk about, but it's so sick when there's like a camera mounted on the door, and it like the character opens it and it changes the what you see, right? This is, and then they close the door and they're in the car.
Yeah, no, the cutaways were like really good.
So fire,
Yeah.
so fire.
Oh, there was also Ratcatcher from way back from Lynn Ramsey.
I haven't seen it. Is it good?
It's it's super. It has that how to describe the feel. It has a very wide shot. Like there are a lot of wide shots in it. There's a lot of movement and kineticism throughout the whole movie, and the way how it tries to paint the protagonist. I don't want to like get too much into the film. It's like one of those not coming of age stories, but like it's about this like kid that like is learning about like growing up. He catches rats throughout it. He chases rats and moves around it. There's a lot to learn from it. There's this girl that like he likes in that movie. There's this one shot that I remember of just like a rat. It's a very metaphorical shot of a rat with a balloon tied to its tail, going in the like not the atmosphere, but like in space with Earth framed in the background. And I was like, whoa, this is a very inventive shot. And I
Yeah,
liked it a lot. But I like that type of stuff. Just to go back on what I like in cinematography and something that I've been enjoying lately, and Lynn Ramsey is also a good example of this. She likes to frame shots within shots. So, you know how you have your typical movie frame, where it's the wide-angle lens? But my favorite
Word.
directors tend to just add another like layer to that. Like, let's say you're... just for example, I don't have any like movie that I'm...
No. Like you see it on like a mirror or like in a reflection.
Mm, it's like they're
She
okay.
does do that, right? Like,
Yeah, no, she does do that a lot. Yeah, but
no, the most funny thing I think is like, when he's in like the hotel room and they're like fighting, he's fighting that like cop in
yeah,
like the
yeah,
hotel room, fall on the floor, and like something gets knocked over and it like knocks the camera over, I think, and you see the mirror on the ceiling, and
yeah,
you
yeah,
just
yeah,
see
yeah, and you see the
corner
whole
of him,
fight
like,
reflected through that. Yeah, yeah, and
yeah, and and then I think the mirror gets shot or something. It's fucking hectic.
yeah, I love that type of stuff. It doesn't need to be that energetic at all times. There's another movie, MASH, by Robert Altman, and towards the end of the movie, there's a scene where like they're recreating the Last Supper in like cinematography, but like it's a bunch of soldiers in the Vietnam War, but like the Korean element of it, and they're trying to give this guy his last meal because he's suicidal and like he wants to kill himself. The movie's a comedy, by the way. It's hilarious, but the way how he's framing his last meal, it was framed like the Last Supper, and it was just like the barracks that they were eating in was framed within the shot too, so it looked like a painting. It looked like you were like watching a painting moving, and that was like very beautiful. And it was, you see what was happening within the barracks, but it was also outside of it was the rest of the scene happening, where it's just the frame outside of the barracks too. So you can see like it's like you're looking at a painting in a museum. Pretty much, that's the feeling that shot evokes in you. I highly recommend the movie if you haven't seen it. Robert Altman, sorry, is one of my favorite directors. He's made phenomenal movies. He does a lot of really interesting camera stuff. The subject matter in his films are also very atypical. You can call him a Hollywood movie person, but he hates Hollywood movies, if that makes any sense.
Oh, okay, yeah. I've never seen MASH. I'm not really aware of this guy.
MASH
I think
is
it's like a TV show, right?
yeah, MASH. It was a movie first, and then it became a TV series, and it was a very popular TV series. But the movie is, I would call the movie an anthology series about like it's pretty much what I want to do with Boxcar. It's just a cast of characters that you learn about them throughout the whole movie, and the movie's just random vignettes and short stories about different characters and their lives throughout this like military base in Korea. And it's very nice. I saw that narratively and I was like, yeah, no, a movie doesn't need to be narratively consistent throughout. It can just be a bunch of short stories put together, and I tend to like movies like that. Fallen Angels was like that, where it was just 3 different stories about people in a city in Hong Kong. And that's what I kind of... That's just narrative stuff, but like cinematography-wise, it's all really good stuff.
Do you have other like really like favorite directors?
Ooh.
Maybe not just in terms of cinematography, but like people you really fuck with heavy.
I mentioned the ones off the top of my head. Cocteau. I forget his first name, but Cocteau. He's one of my favorite directors of all time. Super inventive from way back in the 1950s. You see hyper experimentative shots that are like still very impressive to this day and age. Jean Cocteau, I think his name is. Yeah, it is Jean Cocteau. That was right.
Wow, I think I've seen this picture of him before with like a bunch of hands. That's really sick.
Yeah, his
You know
stuff.
what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. He's hands are a common theme in his work now that I think about it. Because he likes to focus on, he likes to do extreme close-ups. And show a lot of emotion through atypical means, because usually when people think about showing emotion, go to facial expressions, go to the eyes. But he likes to frame things in a way where you can see emotion in other ways. Cocteau is one of my favorites.
Is there like is there a film you would suggest from him?
Orphée or Orpheus. It is one of my favorite films of all time. 1950 Orpheus by Jean Cocteau. It is a modern retelling, or a modern at the time retelling, of the Orpheus myth. Greek myth, guy goes to Hades, not Hades, the underworld to like bring back his wife, as long as like, you know, he doesn't look back. It's pretty much the Sodom and Gomorrah myth, but in ancient Greece. Highly recommended.
What is it called again?
Orpheus. Orpheus. 1950. One of my favorite movies.
Oh, okay.
Aesthetically, I actually borrow a lot of, like, I'm going to be referencing that movie a lot, actually, in chapter 3 and 4 of my comic.
Yeah, I found it. Yeah, because I want to peep that. I like black and white films. I've been trying to watch older stuff recently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't recommend this movie that much. It's interesting to look at. There's a... Who is this director? The movie's called Persona. It's a Belgian film.
But you're saying it's like visually really crazy though?
I wouldn't say it's visually very crazy, but it's very inventive with the way how it frames characters. It's very unnerving as a film.
Oh, okay, right on.
Especially at the time. Persona 1966 was when that movie came out. But I really like black and white films, especially ones that are very well composed, because you get to understand a lot about value and how value really makes characters and objects in a scene pop, and how like it really narrows down how you like focus on a scene. Color is very beautiful. I love it when directors use color very well, but I tend to not think too much about color when I'm working on things. I think mostly on value and character posing and framing, and I take a lot of that from old films that I've seen. But to go back, because I can talk about stuff like that forever, but like, what about you? What do you like in cinematography yourself?
Mostly I said it already. I mean, I really like a lot of shots where the camera is far away and like doesn't move, or more like omnipotent camera, I guess, like David Fincher, like where it's you stop.
Oh yeah.
You kind of forget that the film has a director, and just get absorbed in the story. If it's more like, I don't know, just dry like that, and it doesn't the filmmaking, what's going on with the camera is not like drawing attention to itself. I feel like, but I mean, my favorite is when it's like that, but it's a little turned up, like we you know, I said like Lynn Ramsey or like Nicholas Winding Refn. I feel like that's really cool when you know, every once in a while there's something crazy with the camera where it's like a handheld shot just to like bring home the impact.
Yeah.
Or the camera is on something, like mounted on a car somewhere or something like that. Like I think that stuff is sick. And I mean, yeah, I really like when just subtle stuff, when it's like in really tense scenes. A lot of tense scenes, they'll do a very slow truck in. I think that's really sick.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? When someone's talking, the camera's just on them and it's zooming in basically, but very, very slowly. I really like that. It just builds like drama and suspense. Surely it's been in animation, but it's not really. It's not really in a lot of animation. I want to do stuff like that in animation, and like, I don't know. Have you seen Outrage? It's like a Yakuza film.
No, I haven't seen Outrage. Let me check
Like
that out.
Takeshi Kitano, like
Oh, okay. I know the director. Yeah, Takeshi Kitano
yeah,
is one of my favorites.
yeah. The camera work in that is really dry, and there's it. I don't think it ever moves. The camera moves like a few times in the whole movie, and that's like I don't know. That's pretty fire. Like the composition is really good too. Like it's hard when the top of the frame and the bottom of the frame are like perfectly parallel with like the
Hmm.
floor or the horizon or whatever.
Does the
Like
character in that movie have a son, like a child that he's like looking for, or am I confusing that with a different?
that must be something else.
Yeah, no, okay.
I don't think. Yeah, there's nothing like that in Outrage. It's like I don't know. It's just a bunch of like yakuza gangs. They're like beefing with each other, but
Yeah.
it's like really fucking violent. It's kind of disturbingly violent, but the cinematography is so banging, dude. Like,
Hmm.
and the acting is like intense and everything, and you know
Have you seen
it's not.
Hanabi slash Fireworks by Takeshi Kitano?
I know that I no a long time ago. I don't really remember it, but I remember I went through like a phase where I was like, checking his shit out, and I was like, okay, is there more? Because I think Outrage was the first one I watched, and I saw that he had made a bunch of other Yakuza films,
Hmm.
and so like I checked them out, and none of them really stood out to me. I think like Sonatine's was pretty good. That's the only one I really remember though, other than
Hanabi has
Outrage.
this one shot where like he shoots a guy in the snow, and you see the blood splatter on the ground. You don't see the guy getting shot, but you see how the blood splatters on the snow, and it was like one of the most like super well shot scenes, like just to display that the action happened. It's also very depressing towards the end. I'm not gonna get into it. I still think it's worth watching for anybody that hasn't seen it. But yeah.
Yeah, so I like more subtle stuff, and I mean talking about like restraint and like not being flashy with the camera, like moves at least, and just sort of presenting it in a more like clinical way, I guess, with with the camera. I saw a movie called The Innocents. Have you seen that?
No, who the innocence
Dude, it's like I'm low key obsessed with it right now. It's
is it
like
a new
it's kind of
movie?
like it's pretty new. Yeah, it came out like a few years ago, 1 or 2 years
Oh,
ago.
this poster is sick for it. The
It's
kid like on the
bro, so
swing.
trip. This
Oh,
movie's trippy as fuck, dude. It's like about these little kids who like they start to become like psychic, but it's not just like at first they just like start doing stuff at the same time,
mm-hmm.
and it like shows it, and then they realize that they can like hear each other's thoughts, and then like yeah, one of the yeah, I won't give away the whole plot, but like the visual how it's represented when they like move shit with their mind and like stuff like that is so fucking nuts.
I
It's
gotta.
really
You know what? I haven't been seeing new movies lately, so this is a good one to like check off for me.
yeah, The Innocents. It's a Swedish film, I think. I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure it's Swedish. The director made another one called Thelma, which is kind of similar. It's about a college girl, I guess, but who like she she's able to like make people disappear.
Hmm.
Like she like puts them in like another dimension, but she like the thing about it is she can't control it. She
Oh, that's
like does it.
cool.
Yeah, she
I
does it like when she has seizures, and when she has a seizure, she'll like someone that she's thinking about or someone that she knows will like literally blink out of existence, and so it's like, but it's like really realistic and like dry how like how she deals with it and how her family deals with it. It's so crazy. There's some crazy like hallucination sequences and
hmm.
yeah, it's good.
I gotta. It's also modern supernatural stories, which I'm very interested in. I like the idea thematically and what you can do. It's just a very out there idea, like having seizures and someone just randomly blips out of existence, and I like taking the extreme, like fantastical element of it and like putting people into like real responses. And that's what I'm getting at, like based off your description, how people like learn to live with this type of thing happening to them.
Yeah, I like I like the innocence more because it's like not depressing,
Okay.
and that's something I've been talking to my girl about this a lot, and I've been talking to people about this a lot. Is like I like dark stuff, I like edgy stuff, but I don't like stuff that like makes you depressed after you watch it for real. And I feel like I feel like I feel there is some stuff that's good that makes you feel depressed after, but like I'm not. I like stuff where like it's like uplifting, even if there was like horrible shit in the story.
And now I do
It's
appreciate stories like that a bit more myself personally, like more uplifting tales, but I don't dislike depressing stories. In fact, I'm someone that I'm naturally inclined to writing things that are just not that happy. Actually, my comic is just me practicing a lot of just learning how to make a more fun story for a more general audience, not how I
yeah.
would typically write things.
This is interesting. Is like communicating it visually, and I would say that visually, you and me both like we like a more depressing looking drawing.
Hmm.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
At least aesthetically, like the stuff I'm making is like really dark. But I guess I'm talking more in terms of plot. But visually, yeah, like a lot of dark, a lot of contrast. The characters are my stuff and your stuff is like there's an aggression to it, which I really love. Actually, I there's my favorite artists um, have that. Like Felipe Smith
Oh yeah.
and Robert Valley, they have like an intensity to their drawings, just graphically when you look at it.
Robert Valley especially, I think he's a common denominator for both of us. We both really like Robert Valley stuff. Uh, what I get out of Robert Valley personally is a sense of direction, which I really like. Everything is everything in the frame that Robert Valley does points to somewhere else in the frame. The characters are
Yeah,
angled in a very particular way to showcase, like, hey, this is how your eye is supposed to move throughout the frame or the camera. And that's what I try and implement with my own stuff, just to really direct people's eyes in different directions. It's in a way where, like, a lot of the shots that I do can only work in a very particular angle. I hate flipping some shots around because I don't design things to be flipped. I design things to be looked at a very particular way. And if you were to flip them, it would just ruin the sense of flow that I'm trying to establish.
yeah, I try to do that a lot. Like just have it be really gestural and like you were saying, like all these different parts of the drawing are like if you simplified the drawing, the whole drawing down to like 3 lines
Hmm.
or 2 lines or 1 line, they're all like going to in the same direction, and it makes it look like it's moving. Like Felipe Smith does that too. The interesting thing is Felipe Smith has a lot of detail, and his characters. If you look at Felipe Smith art, it's really noodly and round, but
Hmm.
it still has that energy. And Robert Valley does the opposite. He like straightens shit out. You know what I mean? Like stuff is like smoothed out where it's just there's other people who do it like Jamie Hewlett and
Hmm. Hmm.
other people they just they remove information. When you look at your arm like realistically, right, there's all these like lumps and bumps of the muscles and bones, and when you first like start learning anatomy you're drawing that shit, but like when you remove that information and just each break the character into these really simple shapes, it makes it more flat, but it also makes it more fast. Like you can see like the motion, and I mean, I think that's why a lot of people in our generation like manga more than comics. Comics, there's some comics that are like amazing. Don't get me wrong, and I
Hmm.
like comics, but manga has like a movement and a like an energy to it, just with like speed lines and the like obvious stuff like that. Yeah.
I think my favorite comic artists have learned a lot from manga themselves, like Trad Moore, who does The
Yes.
Legend of Luther Strode, which
Yeah,
is
he did the Ghost Rider
yeah,
comic, right?
yeah. I know Felipe
Yeah, that's
Smith worked
fire.
on that too.
Yeah, that's where I know him from. His stuff is really good. It's like, yeah, it's hard to describe actually. It's crazy though.
Trad
Has a lot of
Moore's.
that energy. Yeah,
Yeah, no, Trad is. I see a lot of his stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty much animation. The way how like characters are like moving across the screen, not the screen, the page, and
yeah, but it's
the way
like
how he
one
angles
draw.
everything. Yeah.
It's so sick. Yeah,
It,
I'm looking at some of Pradmore's stuff right now. Yeah, this is yeah. It's it's a lot more detailed, I would say.
it is, but it's also very focused. You don't lose a lot of what's actually
You know what?
happening in the scene.
Yeah, you know what I love about it is that it's so detailed, but like from far away you can tell what's going on in the image still. Like the silhouette and the
Yes,
composition is
yes,
still super clear, and then when you look closer, there's like insane amounts of detail.
yeah. It's like what Tradmore does a lot is he draws a lot of veins in places that veins shouldn't be normally, but like it doesn't hurt the actual drawing. He's like this inventiveness with it. He also it's like Michelangelo, like to go back to like the classical masters. Uh, Michelangelo just made up muscles that don't really exist in human anatomy, but it still works because he's a gestural master. Like the Sistine Chapel, if you look at like God and David making contact, there's just a lot happening there with the muscles and the anatomy that's just not real. I know how human bodies work and look because I've studied it, but it all works because the gesture is just perfect. It's all there. And I feel like a lot of artists nowadays are, or like the ones that stand out to me, work a lot with gesture, and they know how to emphasize the gesture of a piece.
Yeah, because I feel like that's what draws you into an image
Yeah,
in the first place. Like somewhere where your eye for your eye to go,
it
and if
makes
it
it
lands,
relatable
yeah,
because every day when you're going outside and you're looking at people or you're going to the gym, you're seeing how people move, and you get an understanding of people's gesture. People just naturally move and they're kinetic, and you can spend a lot of time just hashing out like fine details, but if you don't get that gesture down, it kind of loses people. I think like even in photography, I think the most successful type of photography is photography that captures a gesture on top of framing. But that's just me. You good?
yeah. Looking at more stuff, it's
Mm-hmm.
super clean. There's none of from what it looks like, there's none of the sketch in it at all. Like it's
Oh no.
very, very clean and like surgical. Like there's so many lines and they're so straight and they're all so close together. It's kind of crazy. He does it. I guess it looks like Photoshop, right? Man,
Uh,
some of
I,
them, some of
I,
them, some of them are
I,
traditional, but like
I know he's mostly a traditional person.
yeah, fucking insane to get that clean with it. With your like line art.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was like obsessed with there was a time when I was definitely obsessed with getting like really, I guess, perfect line art. Definitely. Kind of crazy. I like the shading, where the edges of the shadows have like spikes.
Yeah,
That shit looks sick.
he does a lot of that there too. Uh, Tradmore's been one of my favorites for ever since one of my comic friends first introduced me to him. Like back when I was in college, one of my friends was studying cartooning, and he was like, "Yo, check out Legend of Luther Strode." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'm gonna go to the bookstore and buy it." And I was like, "Whoa, okay, this is actually one of the better artists that I've seen." And I learned a lot from just like reading Tradmore stuff, because he's just very, very, very meticulous with everything. I actually should put some practice into like inserting more detail to my things. I think I'm going like a lot in the simplistic side of things, and now I can start adding more details and more layers to my drawings to like kind of accentuate form a bit more.
I tend to like stuff that where it's like more obvious that it's a drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Same here.
I kind of wish. I think we were talking about this before the show started, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like um I like stuff where it's more obvious that it's a drawing. And I actually feel like I have too much like perfectionism when it comes to like the cleanliness, and I wish that I could like I don't know, let it be rougher even than it is. I am able to like leave some of the sketch in it, but like I like stuff there where it's like I like the anime scene in Kill Bill
Oh
where
yeah.
it's like pencil drawings. And you can see like the shading, and it's really obvious that it's paper animation, and it's done with a pencil. Like it's not surgically perfect. And like digital stuff, I've been considering getting like a light table and like doing some of the stuff like on paper, because that's what I had to start doing with illustration. I had to start just like doing the sketch in on paper and not starting it digitally, because I don't know, I feel like for some reason it's just better when you do it on paper. It comes out looking better. I think it's because you can't zoom in.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my guess. Like it just keeps you far enough away from it to like get a better, I don't know, get a better handle on it.
Me personally, I don't like zooming in on art when I'm working on it. I like to keep it. I like to see the whole frame, just to understand how the piece is like looking as a whole at all points or at all times. Because if I get lost in going super close into it, I lose the sense of what the actual piece is supposed to look like, and I think that's what helps me keep that rough edge in my work, because it's just I'm not focused on the nitty gritty or super close in. Because like like imagine if you're doing that like physically with traditional like pieces of paper, like the equivalent to that is like getting your eyes super close to the page, and that's not good for your eyes. And
Yeah,
I do that digitally too. I don't like going super close to my screen. I like to keep my body like arm's length away from my tablet when I'm working, and I like to zoom it out. I work at like I never work closer than 100% for a picture, because if I'm going to work at
probably a
like
good
pixel
ratio.
length, it's just I'm already losing sense of what the picture's supposed to be. That said, I
Yeah,
could definitely go cleaner. That's always something I can do. Vector art is something that I look at a lot, and I'm like, I really appreciate how much dedication that it takes for people to actually make things look super clean. Because that's an art form in and of itself, just inking.
yeah, for sure. I feel like it's a little bit different too, because like, um, Cintiq it tries to like fix this, but it says that there's like a texture on it, right, on the actual screen of the Cintiq
Mm-hmm.
to provide the similar resistance to a piece of paper. But when you do it on your sketchbook or something, like the lead on the paper is like resisting it physically, and I feel like the plastic nib on the plastic screen doesn't doesn't have that resistance. And I think that might have something to do with it, because it's a more physical act. I feel like it is actually a more physical act when you're doing it with lead on paper.
Uh, I love. Okay, so Here's the thing. I actually feel like I have way more control traditionally than I do digitally, just because of that tactile sense that you're describing right now. Because I have very good hand-eye coordination, but also there's a drag of paper that you don't get digitally, where it kind of slows down your pencil push or pull, depending on how you draw. And with the digital work, I just have such a hard time actually controlling what the canvas is going to like do, because like my hand is sliding all across the screen. There's almost zero friction to it. And
Yeah, the other thing I noticed is like if you draw, I remember when I went a long time drawing just digitally, I like stopped being able to draw well traditionally. Like, have you noticed that? Like, if you like, that's what like freaked me out. I was like, okay, like this is different. Like, if you, because you can kind of maintain a similar skill level only doing digital stuff, but then you realize like that finer coordination where you're like, especially like inking something with like a pen. I've never been good at that. Like, I don't try to do that to even like, you know what I mean? Like, I just do the pencils and then just scan that. Because I feel like I always fuck it up. Like fully. The only time I don't fuck it up is when I'm like doing life drawing or something, or just doing sketches of people in public or something like that. Like,
yeah.
if I'm doing it that fast, I can do decent stuff with like ink. But other than that, if I really have to get down there, that's why I'm like bad at tattoos. Like, me and my wife have tattoo machines. She's way better than me. I'm not really good at tats because like you have to have that, like it's too tense. I like to draw faster, you know?
I feel that. It's
Where you're like slowly creeping along the line instead of just like sort of more slashing at it.
it's like you're carving. Oh, I mean, okay, tattoos are different. It's not
Totally.
like tattoos are like I have a lot of friends that do tattoos, and it's just you're carving those lines out. You're not just drawing them out. You're just like meticulously going through it and just like digging into like skin, pretty much, just to make sure it's embedded there. That's my impression. I haven't done it. I'll probably never do it because I don't want to fuck up somebody's body. That's that's the one fear I have.
The lines are like that. Like doing straight lines with a tattoo gun, you have to like put your hands together and create like 3 points of like pressure or 3 points of like resistance where you're like touching something.
Mm-hmm.
So your hand is on the arm of the chair or whatever it is, and like that point, and then also you're using both hands. You're using one hand to actually steady your drawing hand, and and you have to do it slowly. Like, you have to go through the line slowly and make it hella straight. And I mean, and it's like the gun is like going, so it's like like it's going up and down really fast,
Yeah.
right? It's like actually vibrating in your hand. You have to do it mad, like clean, but really
Oh.
slowly while it's vibrating. It's hectic. Like I said, my girl is really good at it. It's actually insane when you see it. What I can do is like shading. Shading is like a lot easier. It's just basically like a shading with a pencil on paper. It's the same like motion. It's the when you're like shading. At least what I've seen, like I've done like okay looking stuff, and it's like it has like a gradient, like it goes dark to light with tats, and like I can do that because it's really similar to just shading with a pencil. You don't have to like steady your drawing hand with your other hand, and go through it slow. But I've seen people who ink traditionally who draw like that, like super slow, and it's like it's crazy. I can't do it. I can't do it. I shake. I start to shake, actually. So
I'm not a slow drawer or like illustrator. Whenever I was practicing life drawing way back in school days, during college, I struggled a lot with the longer poses. The longer poses, I just didn't like doing them, just because...
Totally. I totally know what you mean. Like, the 2 minutes would be, like, the sickest ones, right?
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
2-minute
enough time
poses
to
are my favorite, yeah.
enough time to get a really good gesture and to add, like, a few details, like the face. Like, just a little tiny bit of the face. But you have to move to the next one so you don't overwork it. That's, man, such good memories, man.
Yeah, those are my favorite. I actually gotta, like... Once things warm up a bit more, I gotta do more life drawing classes.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't been to one in years actually. I mean, I draw with reference, which is like it's similar, using photo reference or like referencing, just like you just Google whatever you're trying to draw.
Mm.
Like I do that. Like I use reference actually, like extensively. Like I take, well, okay, so for Cassandra Complex, um, I've like actually like gotten in the poses of the characters and like like wearing something that they're wearing or like whatever to like get the, you know, similar pants, similar like jacket, and like done what I want them to be doing in the drawing and
Mm-hmm.
taking pictures of it, and then like no, I've started to use 3D models because it's like, I don't know. First of all, cars are so fucking difficult to draw. Like to
Oh,
draw cars well is truly something else. Like
I
um
love drawing cars, but I also love trying to figure out how to simplify cars and machinery.
yeah, Sean Gordon Murphy's amazing at it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Isutoshi is amazing at it. There's a few people who can draw cars and like really stylize them so they look sick, but it's super hard to draw cars. That's what I've noticed. So I have started trying to use like 3D models. I use 3D I think I'm gonna use the 3D models for the guns. Just like trace 3D models and then put them into Harmony. But
Huh. Yeah.
yeah, so like yeah, like I've been thinking about getting, like I was saying, I was thinking of getting a light table and like doing the animation on paper and then just kind of like doing the same thing that I do in Psy in Harmony, like just cleaning them up a bit and adding darker black and then like, filling in the blacks and just having like the like translating that drawing style into animation, like having the sketches, the pencil sketches, like still visible under like cleaner like dark lines. And you convinced me actually to do it black and white.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember that conversation.
I think you're totally right about. I mean, it's right for the tone of it. Honestly, I obviously am a huge fan of Sin City, um, and like I think you just mentioned to me one day, like honestly, I think it would look sicker. And I think what's crazy is I was already like thinking that, and like, but I was like, there's so many films that I like that are in color that I really like, but so I was unsure on it. I was like, should I make this? Should I just not have any color and just do black and white? And you like told me, you were like, well, what would you say? Like, is that
Oh, let me try and like remember the conversation, how it went.
you told me it would probably look better like black and white, and you could sell it completely. And I was like, you know what? That pushed me over the edge. That was like, okay, yeah, like
I think
it
I
would
saw
look.
one of the pieces that you did for Cassandra Complex, and I really, really like the way how you present the characters and the setting in that style, and I liked how limited the palette was. It was just black and white with a few gradients in the background that made it look a bit faded, and I said to myself, I was thinking, no, this is very unique actually. It displays a lot of control, and not a lot of things look like this. Even in black and white, not a lot of things look like this. And I was thinking, this would be cooler to see animated this way in that type of aesthetic versus color. I felt like when I was looking at it, I was like, maybe color would just take away from the high contrast here. I felt like the high contrast was something that this, especially like that illustrations or the illustrations that you've done, I felt the high contrast black and white was just perfect for what it needed to be. And I felt, yeah, you could make a whole thing like this. You can make a whole movie with this type of aesthetic.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely want to have like textures and gradients and stuff like that. But I think you were right. I feel like it matches the tone better, and it's like, I don't know. It does look sick. The like black, just eliminating it like that. And I've been thinking about that for a long time. If you look at like some of my older comics, I was really trying to make them super colorful and like demonstrate, I guess, really good color harmony and like understanding of that stuff.
Yeah, and you were very successful with them too. I'm thinking back on them, yeah.
Looking back on them, I really cringe, honestly. But
I mean, that's a sign of progress. So
that's a sentiment with a lot of artists, I feel like.
Oh, that's something I wanted to get into, actually, just discussing, like, how do you feel about old work? Because I know when I look at stuff from way back, I'm like, my skill set was not there. Like, I can do it way better nowadays, but I look at some old things and I'm like, oh, hey, I had a lot of really interesting energy going into this piece. Even though it's technically not as impressive as stuff I do right now, it has that feeling that I felt like I've lost as I've started to draw more professionally. And
yeah,
I'm just trying to... I look at some of my old things and I'm like, I can do this way better nowadays. I look at my student film and I'm like, dude. I can redo this whole thing nowadays and make it look 10 times better. But at some point it's just not worth... Even my comic. I've been working on my comic for 4 years now. And I look at what I was drawing 4 years ago versus what I'm drawing now, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, do I want to redo it? And at some point, it's just not worth it. Just keep moving forward, because, I mean, look at, again, we were talking about manga. We can still talk about manga. A lot of mangaka are just... They start drawing their stories one way, and then after like 5 years, it looks completely differently. Even like current super popular things nowadays, like I know Chainsaw Man, actually great example. Chainsaw Man super early on looks kind of funky. The characters look kind of weird, and like they have like super derpy faces, depending on how far away the shot goes. And nowadays it has way more control, way more detail, a lot more subtlety in the character expressions. Backgrounds are also way better nowadays. And Chainsaw Man has just been out for like what, 2018, 4 years, and you can see a massive improvement in Tatsuki Fujimoto. And he's not going to redo the old things because, like, that's time out of your day. You got to tell a story. For animation,
yeah, there's some stuff that I still stand by. I feel like in the last few years I've made stuff that I still look at and I'm like, okay, that's not bad, But yeah. The real challenge is like getting rid of everything that isn't that, which I guess I've sort of gradually done, like, over the years.
What do you mean?
Well, just in terms of, like, having it out there where you, like, want people to see it.
Oh, yeah. I think at some point it's just... You gotta learn when to call something done. Because you need to move on to doing the next thing. You improve the more you finish things, rather than trying to make one thing perfect. Because it's never going to be perfect. No one's ever going to make the perfect thing. It could always be better. But you just got to call it done. You just got to say, okay, this is as much time as I'm willing to put into this. I need to move on to new things. To explore and experiment with different things.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's good to not overwork stuff.
Yeah. Because... This happens with a lot of people, and actually I'm gonna give advice to people that are listening in right now. especially younger artists that are potentially listening in here. Uh, learn to finish projects, and learn to set deadlines. I think that's like a thing people struggle with. Personal deadlines. Say you're gonna draw a piece and give yourself a hardline deadline to be like, it needs to get done within a week or so, or like I need to write a comic, or I need to write a story. And it doesn't need to be the best thing ever, it just needs to be something that's finished. The more things that you're able to finish, the better the quality of the things you're going to finish in the future are going to be. And that's the thing that I really want people to like understand. Like, you gotta finish work. It might not be the best ever, but you gotta finish it, because eventually the more you finish, the better things will be. But yeah.
Yeah, even drawings. Like, if we're talking to like you were saying, like if we're talking to like beginners who are like trying to get better, just do fuck tons of drawings. If you're not good at drawing yet, just do like don't try to bait. That's what I did for a long time, which is don't do this. Is like you get okay at drawing, you're not good yet, and like you really start babying every drawing. Like you start trying to you'll sit down and you'll try to like first drawing you do is like you'll try to do that. You'll try to force like a masterpiece. You know what I mean?
Oh,
don't
no,
do
yeah.
that. Just do fuck tons of drawings, like and try to get better. You can't just get better with pure mileage, just because that's a myth. You can't just straight up draw, and you'll get better. You have to study too.
Yeah, you have to be thinking about how you're drawing too, and
Yeah,
you got
in terms of like just single illustrations. There's no point in like babying them, like taking forever to render them and stuff like that.
Yep. I mean, even in animation, like I've done storyboard work for people. It's just sometimes you make a sequence of shots and you could be spending like 2-3. Oh no, especially for storyboarding, you got to do shots really fast because deadlines in animation are insane, and you got to learn how to be like, okay, I need to do multiple different shots. I need to figure out which one of these shots that I actually like, and see what sticks. And you can't be like the first shot has to be perfect. Sometimes you got to start from scratch, and you gotta
that reminds me, like another thing like that I would tell like illustrators who are just starting out, do a bunch of like thumbnails of the drawing you want to do. It may seem like obvious advice, but do a bunch of like really small shitty versions of the different ideas you have, so you can do them all in like a minute,
Mm-hmm.
So you're not stuck like on one forever, and then you can pick the sickest like thumbnail you do, and like try and draw that bigger.
Yeah. That's
yeah. If someone had told me that when I was younger, it would have been a fucking lifesaver.
Oh, dude, it helps me professionally for storyboarding all the time. Thumbnailing more so, I think it's most important in stuff like that, like storyboarding, because like you need to really figure out your scene before you start to tidy down those drawings. Because if you don't know how your scene is going to play out, and then you're just spending hours drawing like terrible shots, right? They might be technically very beautiful, like drawings, but they could be terrible shots. Bad for the scene, bad for the story, and you're gonna have to start again from the beginning, and it sucks. It's easier to start again when you're in the very beginning of the process, where you're just figuring out like, hey, what does this shot need to be? Does it need to be a far shot? Does it need to be a close shot? And you can do stick figures to just like get the composition down. And once you're good with the composition, then you can just take as much time as you need to make the drawing look good. But yeah, I think that's the only advice like I'm willing to give. Otherwise, practice, study, like you said. Think about what you're drawing instead of just
Yeah.
Instead of just, what's the word? You're not gonna be drawing absent-mindedly. You're gonna have to think about what you want your drawing to mean, what you want it to convey, and what's the best possible way to like get that conveyance out there. And look at what you think is successful. Learn from your peers. Always be looking at your peers too. In a critical way too. You can't just be looking at a drawing and be like, oh, this is cool, but like you gotta deduce, hey, what about this makes me think it's cool? Why do I like this? Why is this drawing successful in my eyes? And then once you start thinking about things that way, you can just grow as an artist.
Yeah, I used to think that images didn't necessarily need a lot of like deep meaning and like symbolism and stuff like that. Like, and you could just appreciate it on a purely aesthetic level. And if you look at a lot of my older art, it's like that. It's like I'm not really thinking that much. I guess all the subject matter was just, I think it was like subconscious, honestly. But yeah, once you start actually consciously thinking about the meaning of the images that you're making, that's like, that's the problem with a lot of like art that I see on Twitter, honestly, is that I noticed this a while ago, and this is what kind of made me want to draw something different, is like, I noticed art that had like just meaning, for lack of a better term, like meaning in it. Like, it actually, the images represented something not literal, but just like idea-wise. And there's a lot of art on Twitter that's really crazy, actually, really amazing visually, but there isn't any meaning. It's just a really sick, cool drawing. You know, and like I said, like I wanted to do stuff like that most of the time that I've been drawing, but I guess recently I've just wanted to do something that's, like, if you look at a lot of like old like religious art and stuff like that, like there's just different like symbols and more heavy like stories, I guess.
Oh yeah, we were talking about this actually before the show started, about putting characters in space versus like putting characters in empty space versus putting them in a setting. If you want to get into that more, actually, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, all I said when I said to you was that like I've been trying to do more like backgrounds, like actually, and think about the background, you know, because you can do a background, but it's not really like related to the character or has like a prop or something in it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But when the character is in an environment and they're like, I don't know, they're using a prop or something, like, then you have more opportunity to add meaning into it, because you look at the character and it's like, what are they doing? What are they actually doing? And what does that mean? What happened? And then it makes the viewer think of like, what happened before this? You know, what led to this image happening? What's going to happen next? You know,
yeah.
If you have meaning in your images, you can have all that shit. But if it's just a sick drawing, it's just a pretty sick drawing. Like it won't hold you there for longer and like retain you remember it. You know?
Yeah, I feel people in general really like being engaged. They like thinking about something, because, you know, when you're looking at a piece, you're looking at like the story behind the piece. You're like putting together a puzzle in your own head. You might not be thinking about it as a puzzle, but that's like what's happening in everybody's minds when they're looking at a painting. Like when you go to a museum, you're like thinking about, oh, what the technique that went into making this painting, why are these characters in this particular setting, and you're starting to add context to the scene, your own personal context, and that's unique to yourself. And a good picture or illustration or painting or anything really gets people engaged in that way, where they're starting to put the pieces together in their own head and fill in the blanks of what's happening in the scene. And the more that people have to think about in a painting or in anything really, the more that they're going to get out of it. Even if they're just looking at it for like 5-10 seconds max, right? they're still going to be engaged in a way that like impacts them in a little way. Versus when if you just have something that's just an object floating in space, all you're really thinking about is the object or character. And that's not a bad thing. But
you don't have anything else to go on.
Yeah, and other like for a normal person, they're just going to see it and they're going to be like, oh, cool, pretty thing, and then they're going to move on to the next thing. And it might leave their heads at some point throughout the day or week or month. But like a good picture will really stick with somebody. Setting, everything, because they're thinking about it. People like to think. That's something I genuinely believe also. That people do want to be engaged. People do want to think about things. They do want to look at art in a way that's more than just aesthetically pleasing. They just want to feel enriched in and of themselves. And that's how they feel satisfied. That's why games are successful as a medium, because people are engaged with games.
Yeah, I will say that it's, just from my experience, it's not as fun as just drawing subconsciously and just drawing whatever you want for fun. It is that. It requires like more effort. Like to sit down and say, aside from, I think a lot of like people when they start drawing, they're like, what's my style? What's my drawing style? And the question that I feel like I took too long to get to is like, now what do I want to draw? Like what subject matter do I want to draw? And that's harder. That's harder than just sitting down and starting to draw stuff that you like. Way harder. And that's what I'm kind of like, oh, you know. And sometimes I still do, like a lot of the graffiti stuff that I try to do, just in my sketchbook, like that's like more subconscious stuff that I do now, like just more intuitively drawing, rather than sitting and like, you know, going around for a long time. I walk around just in life and like for a long time thinking about what the next drawing that I want to make for a long time before I sit down and try and draw it. But it's not like that when you first start drawing, I've noticed. Like, but it's something you could do. It's something you could do early on if you're starting drawing and being like, what subjects, what you know, what story could I tell that's not just like, that's not cliched, like not like something that you like exactly, but more just combining different stuff. I remember I made lots of different comics that were like similar to stuff that I liked. Like my comics when I was in high school were like Quentin Tarantino, like Martin Scorsese, like type stuff, like gangster stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was too like derivative, and I didn't understand like I was like a teenager obviously, so I didn't understand the deeper meanings of those narratives and why they like work. So obviously they were like the comics were like garbage. But I feel like I'm trying to get a handle on the meaning stuff now. With like writing, I mean I've always really mechanistically wrote, like I just forced myself to do it. But with this project that I want to do now, I'm sort of just letting it come to me, and it's coming to me like non-sequentially. Like sometimes I'll get an idea for the outline and I'll do some of the outline, and then sometimes I get an idea for a little scene or a small moment, and they're totally like not in order at all in the overall story. But like I'm just writing it like piecemeal like that, and I've tried to write it like the other way, just sitting down and like going straight ahead and like literally like without an outline, like telling the story without an outline. And I can't. It just does not work for me. I think people do it different ways.
The method is different for everybody.
I can't, which is almost like unbelievable to me. Apparently Cormac McCarthy does that, which is like, I can't even understand how someone would do that, but I can't do it. So I'm kind of doing both, but it's like coming randomly. But because I'm not like I'm not forcing it. I don't really have So I more do that with drawings.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do like drawings, but I'm just like allowing the story to form naturally because it is taking longer than it would just like sitting down and being like, okay, chapter one, you know.
Right, right.
But yeah,
In my experience, okay, so I come from a writing background. Before I even started drawing or anything like that, I used to write plays, screenplays, one act plays that are performed. And I did get a bunch of my plays performed back in late high school, early college, and I I've been a writer first always. So for me, the way how a story works is I think about the characters, I think about what the script needs to be, and I think about themes a lot whenever I'm writing. Uh,
characters come first for you.
yes, because characters are what move the plot forward.
For sure.
It's
Yeah.
it's characters, and then it's particular moments that I want the characters to hit. And usually I think about these key moments first, and then I retroactively make a plot and script around that myself. So for a short film that I made for school, it was for Boxcar City actually, and this is me just I had the characters already made. I knew what I wanted the characters to be, so the characters were already solved in my head. But there was this one moment that I was thinking about. This was just pure, just I was just thinking I want to get the characters to drive on the side of a building. I want an action shot of characters driving a car on the side of a building, and I was thinking to myself, how do I justify a plot to cause this to happen? And then at that point it becomes yeah, it sounds ridiculous, right? But like that's how I write things a lot of the time, where it's just
I know exactly what you mean. Like there's this movie called Day Watch. It's like a Russian action movie, and that happens. I remember, and I think in Panty and Stalking it happens too, where
Yeah, yeah.
the he's like driving on the side of a building.
Yeah.
Yeah, bro, that's so insane.
And I'm like, this is it's stupid, but like how like, and you think about those things too, and you're like, how do they make the plot to justify that to happen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And but
Like you're on a bridge. You're on a bridge or something, right?
yeah, and I'm thinking to myself like, it's creative problem solving, and that's what my favorite part about writing is. I like to think of this one scene, the climax. I usually think of the climax for a story before I think about anything else. How the story ends, the ending moments. And then I try and retroactively fit the setup for the narrative to hit that point. Like, how do I justify this happening? I actually did that with chapter 2 of my comic, where I laid out all the parts for the viewer to figure out how the climax will hit by itself. When you read my comic just normally, from one sitting to another, from beginning to end, you see a lot of things get introduced, and they feel kind of random in the story, but they help establish the characters a bit more. Nothing's ever random, even if you just use something one time. It's always to move either the characters forward or to get the audience to understand things a bit better. But in my comic, chapter 2, I introduce the shock collar for Darian, my vampire, and he gets shocked very early on in chapter 2. And the payoff for this happened 2 years afterwards, where the audience understands that the shock collar is something that he gets in Chekhov's gun, right? You see Chekhov's gun, the gun is going to be used at some point. And then throughout the whole plot, I'm pretty sure an audience would have forgotten about that moment in the story where he got shocked for the first time, because I played it off as a gag. It was like he did something to annoy a character and then he got shocked. And that was like, you know, the point of the joke at that point in the comic. Later on, when they're fighting this giant monster bird, Void Beast, he turns into a swarm of bats because, like, you know, it's been established earlier on that he can shapeshift. And I reintroduced that part in later on in the story. And then I reintroduced the shock collar too, because like the shock collar started to become the solution to the problem at that point in the story that I already introduced super early on. And to me, I design it as like a puzzle for the audience to solve for themselves. That nothing ever happens for no reason, and ideally it can be satisfying. And that's what I want to do with stories. I like to write like that, where I'm making a puzzle for people to solve. It's not necessarily a mystery story or anything like that, but it's just I like having elements where when people see those elements pop up again in the future, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because I saw it happen before.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But for writing, because the writing process is different for everybody. It's hard to teach writing. You can teach dialogue, because the flow of conversation is something that's inherent for everybody. But things like themes, that's difficult. Like, what do you want your story to be about, right? That's something you have to sort of solve in the early stages before you get anything written down proper.
Yeah, if you try to go purely off of aesthetics, it's tends to not end up well. Even if it's someone really good and creative doing it, it tends to not go as well.
Yeah, it's a balance. It's very difficult to figure out, especially with. Oh, here's what I recommend actually for people: write poetry. Poetry / lyrics, music in general. Because poetry is very short form, and you're trying to truncate a lot of information into a very like small bit of writing. And poetry is all about themes, because every single poem is about something. No matter, you can't write a poem about nothing. Even if it's just a poem about people talking to each other, there's a motive. There's like a reason why this is happening. But the beauty in poetry is that poetry is short, and you really have to focus on saying what you need to say in as few stanzas as possible, or as like without a lot of fat. Because with poetry, if you start like adding more words than what you need, it gets kind of annoying to read. And it's a big exercise in, do you know what you want to say? Do you know what you're trying to convey? Do you understand metaphor? Do you understand how to move forward in as few lines as possible, and how to tell a complete idea? And if people are struggling with writing, a story, I say try and tell your story in a poem or in a song, and see what you can do there. Or if you want to like make it more abstract, like let's say you're working on like a series of scenes, right? Or like long form story, try and like tell a scene in a short story format, or in a poem format, or poetic format, because it'll help you understand what you want to say a lot better. That's what I do personally from my own things, and I feel it can help. What up?
I said right on.
Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, I don't really have much more to say on the writing thing. Read. That's what I also suggest to people. When you're watching a movie, see if you can find the screenplay, because you can learn a lot from screenplays. But yeah. What else can I say? Oh yeah, let me ask a question that somebody asked in the thread originally. Let me check it out. Pregunta asks Pastel Fire at Frail Bulb on Twitter. Who or what inspired you to draw? I think I already know the answer to this, but like, who inspired you to start drawing more actively?
To start drawing or to start drawing more actively?
It can be
Like,
both.
to start drawing, it's just like comic books in the library when I was a kid. Like, I saw comic books in the library and I saw like cartoons on TV, and yeah, that's basically it. Like, that's how I started drawing.
Okay.
Or it made me want to draw originally. Um, taking more, a bunch of just seeing more art, just finding new people that I really liked. After that, yeah, that's what made me want to take it seriously.
So who would you say would be?
Seeing better shit, and like, because it's, the stuff you see when you're a kid is like not the best stuff that's out there. You find better stuff as you get older, and you realize that art is capable of so much, and that's what makes you want to take it real serious. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But like, to then transition into the next part, like, who really pushed you to like actually like pursue this more seriously? When you saw, like, let's say you saw an artist and you thought to yourself, yeah, he's doing that or she's doing that, and I want to do that. Who made you feel that way? If you have one person like that.
I mean, no, I mean, to be honest, that was super early too. That would be the first comics that I ever saw, which I think were Tintin by Hergé.
Oh hell yeah, I love Tintin.
Yeah, I saw. I think it was Tintin comics in the library when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and like even then I like saw that and I was like, yo, that's crazy. I thought that was crazy. Like, it's I mean, everyone knows what Tintin is, but it's like a drama thriller with like detectives and shit trying to solve mysteries, but it's like it's kind of realistic, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, Tintin has this sense of weight to it in the actual comic where
Yeah.
like characters aren't doing crazy things. It's not like Popeye.
Yeah, it was real life shit. Like, that's what I noticed about Tintin when I was, I guess, a kid, is that it looked like real life. Like, it looked more like real life than the other comics, and I guess if I had to say, I would say that, like, because I drew for fun, but I did a bunch of other stuff for fun. I skateboarded and I like danced and did all kinds of shit. I did parkour, like, all kinds of shit when I was a kid and when I was a teenager. But like at a certain point, I was like, what am I best at? And I felt like I was the best at drawing. And yeah, like, so I just started to like be like, okay, how do how do I take that seriously? Well, how do the people that I like take it seriously? What do they do? And I just like, I think the internet was a really good resource coming up. So like, it used to be that you'd have to find an apprentice or get hired somewhere to get really like good education in how to make art.
Yep.
But the internet, I mean, I was really lucky, I feel like, because I just found like places where they just tell you right away, like, just do studies, like, here's do life drawing, do studies, here's how you do it. If you don't have that, you're kind of like, it's different. It's a different story. But yeah, I would have to say like Hergé, Tintin comics, Asterix.
Oh, dude, Asterix. Oh, dude.
Oh, yeah.
That's stuff I grew up with. Yeah.
Comic is so fire. Yeah, that and like, and Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin and Hobbes was really amazing.
Yeah, classics.
When I was a kid, and yeah. That stuff. And on the other side of it, I guess like, well, around the same time, I saw like Inuyasha. I think was the first anime I ever saw.
Mm-hmm.
I would think I must have been like 8 or 9 years old, and I saw Inuyasha on TV at like 9:30. They would start playing more hectic shit, and like, or 9 or 9:30 or whatever, and they had Inuyasha and like Spider-Man and a few other things, but Inuyasha was like, it's kind of the opposite of Tintin. Inuyasha was more like insane to me as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely fantastical. Good.
Yeah, like the shit that people wear, like the fashion they have, and like yeah, like that was the first thing. That was the first anime I saw, and that as well. like was a super early one where it's like, wow, like what if I drew something like that? And I did. I tried, yeah, at that age, like 9, 10, I tried to draw in that style, and obviously I couldn't at all. But it was like you think it looks like anime. Like people look at anime and they think it's like simplified and that it's like easy to draw. Really good anime is as difficult, I would say, as difficult as like traditional Western painting, like salon painting, where it's like fully realistic. Because I've studied both, and I've just started seriously studying anime. And it's like, oh shit, like this is a whole different like discipline than
Yeah,
like
yeah,
drawing
yeah.
comics or like okay. So to give you an examples of what I'm talking about specifically, like I've been doing pencil, and I kind of want to post this on Twitter when they're fully done. But I've been doing studies from like anime that I really like 90s anime. I'm doing studies on Kite
Oh yeah, I've been
and
seeing your kite stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I've more recently I've done like newer studies of it, and like and Ghost in the Shell and Vampire Hunter D,
Oh
and like
yeah.
those really like Vampire Hunter D, Bloodlust, and yeah, and some other stuff, some other anime that I really like, Samurai Champloo, and
Mm-hmm.
like really trying to draw exactly like that. And I realized it's kind of fucked. Like it's not realistic at all. It's heavily stylized.
Yep, yep, yep.
Oh, but with the cell shading, and you kind of buy it. Like the bodies are weird, the drawings are weird, but when it's colored and cell shaded, it looks like super legit for some reason. And that's the thing that really blew my mind. Is like, okay, this is fucking one of those drawings, one of those cells from Ghost in the Shell or from like Ninja Scroll or something like that
Mm-hmm.
is such a fucking detailed drawing that you can't even understand it until you actually go and look at it and try to draw exactly like that. Try to draw exactly like that on paper. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, the hair is so fucking detailed. Everything's so, and you gotta remember, these motherfuckers are making thousands of these drawings, and
Yep. Yep.
it takes me like 4 or 5 hours to like actually do one that's like clean that looks like that.
No, the directors that are on those shows, like, and the Genga artists are insane people. Like, keyframe artists are. We don't really have that. We don't have keyframe directors here in the West. We have like typical directors that do keyframe animation, but we don't have people that are just devoted to like working on keyframes and then passing it off to other people, and making
Yeah,
sure, and like a supervising keyframe director after that, that are just focusing hard on just making the keyframes look as good as possible.
absolutely. I think my favorite animation directors are all animators, and they actually animate heavily on their own shit. You know, all of
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, it's really crazy. You know, like Yasuomi Umetsu does all the character designs, wrote the story,
Yep.
directed the animation, and this he boarded the whole thing himself, and he did key animation himself, which is fucked. You know, but
Yep.
it's he did that, and Yoshiaki Kawajiri, I think his name is Kawajiri. He did that too. Like all so much of it is coming from one person, and like Robert Valley, Peter Chung, like on Eon Flux. We've been watching Eon Flux again recently, and like um, you know, I showed it to some homies the other weekend or the earlier this weekend.
Yeah.
And I'm tripping. Like, this is crazy though. And Peter Chung did like almost all the key animation on this second season of Eon Flux. Those
That's
short ones,
insane. Holy shit.
it's it's crazy as fuck. But him and Robert Valley, I like people, I like directors who like have a very heavy hand in the project. Like they design the whole look and the how the characters move and what happens in the story, everything. That's to me the best animation that exists. Honestly, is when it's handled when it's so I guess auteur like focused on like one person's vision and they're doing a lot of heavy lifting to make it happen. There's something magical about like movies and even games that are like that have like that are made by one guy or like almost by one guy by himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you get a lot of their own personal effort and influence on it. And they also get the final say because, like, when you have a very particular vision, you tend to not slack on it. Like, let's say a bunch of people are collaborating on one project, right? And some people can, like, half-ass certain things on that project just because, you know, they're not that passionate about it. But when one person is putting, like, you know, their full say, it's like they put their... Let me rephrase this. It's like they put their responsibility on themselves. And they don't want it to be bad, or they don't want to half-ass anything because they want it to be as good as it can be because, like, it's them. They're putting their whole selves in it, and they don't want to half-ass their whole selves. That's at least, like, the philosophy.
Yeah, it's definitely more common in, like, literature, I feel like, for just the creator to have that level of control.
Yep. But that's to say, it's nice to have editors and other people to, like, you know, bounce off of.
Yeah, definitely.
Just to help it be the best thing that it can be. And there was another question I wanted to ask, but I kind of, like, slipped my brain as we were, like, discussing anime authorship.
I think there's Western stuff like that too, but yeah, like animated films and stuff done by one person.
I feel like we're hitting into a new generation currently where people are getting kind of disillusioned with industry standards.
Yeah.
And industry projects, and people are starting to push more for their own independent projects. Like, I know, just recent example for people that are listening that I'm pretty sure they know about, Hell of a Boss currently is something like that, where it's just, you know, one person's passion project pushed to the extreme, getting a lot of people working on it. And it's pretty high quality, you know. Vivzy Pop's Hell of a Boss in terms of, you know, very tightly written narratives and stories, good animation. I have a few friends that are working on it as cleanup artists and storyboard artists. And
yeah, and that stuff's amazing. Like, she's a great director. You know, she obviously knows what she wants. She knows what she wants to make exactly, and it's, you know, it's the same thing. It makes it more enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, and
rather than just like a company paid some other company who paid some other company to promote their product, and you are trying to help with it. Like,
yeah,
you know, I mean, like people would rather do the former than the latter, I think.
Oh, 100%, like, yeah. And I think audiences right now are more keen on that. They like things that actually have passion put into it, and they're not just trying to. This is more for the independent scene. Like, I feel like the independent scene is growing stronger because now that people are getting older, they're getting more income, and they're willing to support creators that they really enjoy more. And I think, you know, we're heading into a good direction for the independent scene. At least I'm hoping.
I feel like the people. The other thing is, I feel like the people in our generation are like, they haven't done their best stuff yet, I guess. So it's like it still has yet to, like, really, like, change. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you. The people are just, like, you know, trying to put their magnum opus out, or they're trying to get to their magnum opus. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like once you become, like, an adult, you ideally you take it more seriously and be like, okay, how much shit can I do, like, during my life?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yep. How many days do I have left, and how much can I get done within those days? Like, how many projects do I have in my life? And, like, I think once you start thinking about things that way, you start to get a bit more serious with the work that you're doing.
If you're realistic, it'll help you, like, narrow it down a lot. Like, I remember having that realization. I mean, it was a very clear, like, moment in time. I was like, you know what I mean? Like, how about you?
For me, that was actually here. Let me put down my story for like how I started Boxcar City. I was 17. No, I was 15 when I was like first conceptualizing the characters and the world, and I was a writer at that time. And then I was thinking to myself, what's the best chance this story has to get told? And not just thinking about it for myself, because like if it's just for myself, I can just sit around like in my room all day and just think about like the story and like think about the characters and like it won't escape my brain. But I was thinking about it like, how do I get this to as many people as possible? What's the best chance this has as a story to exist beyond my head? And then at a certain point I was like, no, it has to be animation. And then I was structuring my life in a way where I need to like learn how to draw and how to make these characters into like cartoons, animation. I learned how to do animation because of that, and I started structuring my whole life to be about how do I tell these stories, how do I give these stories the best possible chance they have to be told and be understood and be appreciated for what they are. And I had that realization where, yeah, no, I need to learn animation. I need to learn how to do animation and comics because this is the medium that will touch as many people's lives as possible. If you asked me this question 100 years ago or 150 years ago, I would have said poetry. I would have written like a bunch of, no, not poetry, short stories. I would have written short stories for these characters. But
Gotcha.
nowadays I'm like, no, I saw what gets people's attention, and that's animation, comics.
Yeah, that was actually a big reason for me too. Yeah, it's easier to get people to look at animation than it is to read a comic, for sure.
Or
That's
to like
probably
read a book. Like my preferred way to tell stories is to write like novels and like words on paper, but that's impossible. Like asking that to like of people, especially for like a fantasy type story, like a modern fantasy type story for like what I'm going for with Boxcar, it's too tough. It's too tough to get people to sit down and read. So that's why I went for animation.
Well, how does architecture figure into all that? Because you do architecture as well.
Oh yeah, I do, and that's my professional. That's how I've been making like the most money over the past few years. How does architecture fit into this? I was good at math. I was good at physics and building designs, and then my parents were like, "Hey, just do architecture because like you have a good like sense of like that type of stuff." And they weren't wrong. Like I'm kind of like naturally inclined to mathematics, but
It's interesting because I see a lot of buildings like in boxcar, like in the backgrounds and that you do.
yeah, I'm trying to do more like photo bashed stuff. Sometimes I draw like sometimes I will actively draw buildings because like if they need to be unique, because if you need to draw a unique building, because buildings are characters too. That's how I think about them. And the setting is also a character. And for some buildings I will hand draw them and I will stylize them like the way how I stylize people, or I like push them to extremes, or I just like mess with like the actual like structure just enough to like give it its own personality. And that's what I do with like some buildings in Boxcar City. Then I also like I'm trying to like implement a lot of photo bashing. Not photo bash. Well, yeah. Where
I was gonna say, for people who are listening to this, if you go to Gentz's Twitter profile, his banner, it has buildings, all right, and the ones in the foreground are, it looks fucking sick. It looks like a early 2000s like Japanese game on GameCube or something. It has like photo bashed buildings. So the textures are like photos or taken from photos.
yep, I took
But
those
the
photos myself.
outlines are like super. But the outlines and the silhouettes, like their perspective, is all cartoony and like simplified. And
Yep.
then there's like super simple buildings in the background. It's fucking sickening, honestly. It's really good.
Yeah,
I like that stuff a lot.
That's stuff I'm really trying to push for more in the future, because like, you know, you can do photo bashing, but like I also want to give them character too, not make them just, you know, typical buildings to fill in space.
Yeah, definitely change them a lot, so that's what I like. This is kind of funny. If you go look at my old art, I like really liberally use textures,
Mm-hmm.
and I like for like patterns and stuff, and it's like it's too loud and it just doesn't usually have a good end product. I found that using photos but like totally hiding the fact that you used a photo has like, I don't know, that's produced the best results for me, is like trying to hide the fact that you used a photo, but actually taking and copying and pasting a photo in there and like using it as like a texture. You can distort the fuck out of it
Yeah.
with the contrast and with like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
skewing it and stuff like that, and just totally change it. And I feel like it's better to change it more, like you're saying, like so that you're like you're looking at it and you're like, is that a photo? Is it just a really good sketch? It's kind of blurry. Like
Oh
you can
no,
get away.
the thing that I do is like, I think I spend a lot of like, I spend just as much time like editing those photos as I would drawing the buildings, and I spend just as much time photo bashing as I do drawing for like those particular like panels. And I think
You can get stuff like that. Like for example, like sometimes you can get stuff that's like super abstract out of photos. Like if you open a photo on your drawing program or whatever, and you just randomly paint bucket over it, you can get like these abstract shapes that you
yeah,
can use for
yeah,
other shit. I do that all the time, and it's like, yeah,
you can learn a
it
lot from
works.
silhouette that
Like
way too.
textures.
Yeah. What I like to do is I like to take like a front-facing building and then I just like cut it and then I like restructure it to make it like a box, pretty much like a cube or like a rectangular prism. And like how many photos did I use in that? Like I'm looking at my banner right now. I'm trying to look back. There are 1, 2, 3 unique buildings, four unique buildings that I've taken photos of, and then I just like, you know, make not 3D models, they're like pseudo 3D models, and then I just superimpose them. I put a lot of like filters on them. I draw shadows and inks. I draw the windows there too, just to like accentuate like, you know, moods, forms, make them look like not what the photos originally look like, just to give it like its own personality.
I feel like if you want a certain effect, I feel like taking photos and like looking how it is actually in real life is like key if you want a certain effect. Like I know that for me, there's been drawings, at least on Cassandra Complex, where I tried many times to draw it from my imagination, and it really didn't work until I took the physical position of the character myself and took pictures of my pictures, right? To see, because you see stuff in the folds of like jeans, how they fall on a body, or how a jacket falls off a body, that I realized this, you couldn't have come up with that from your imagination. You have to observe it in reality.
Oh yeah, no.
You know what I mean? And which blew my mind when I first was like, oh, okay, like this takes your art to the next level. I think the first time I really like clicked to be like, because I had heard that like you hear a lot all the time about using reference, but like doing it yourself and stuff like that, or like you're saying, like going in your city and like taking photos of buildings, like
Yeah,
you're taking your shit to the next level, you know?
yeah.
For sure.
I mean, like, there's a lot to learn from just life in general, and I'm not talking about like, you know, just life stories or like, you know, I mean, yes, always be paying attention, always trying to learn something from your experiences, but just going outside and observing things. You look at a building, like this is what I do. I look at like a building. I'm like, what did the architect have in mind when he designed this? Or like, what was the time period that this was made? What was going on at that time? What was influencing the culture at the time to cause this to look like this? And you start to get a bit more of an appreciation of the world around you. And then once you get that appreciation, you could then apply it to your art in the same way. And the more you observe, the more you learn, the more you're able to apply and, make things feel distinct.
Is there stuff in architecture that you like more?
Like, what do you mean? For me,
your favorite type of stuff, like in architecture.
What do I like?
Like if you here's a better question. Sorry, if you were gonna let's say just build your own house, your dream house to like live the rest of your life in.
Oh yeah, I'm designing one of those actually. So yeah. I'm very in architectural design.
If money was not a non-object.
If money was a non-object? Who?
If it didn't matter, yeah.
I would have a massive atrium garden. Like a vertical garden that goes like across the corner of a building. Like money's not an issue. Oh boy. Rooftop garden. I'm thinking building in mind because I'm a very urban like aesthetic type of guy. So I'm thinking of a building, I'm thinking of a rooftop garden, I'm thinking of an atrium, which is just pretty much a glass viewing inside the building. Like a glass box in the corner of a building. That's what an atrium is, pretty much, where it lets natural light inside to allow light to bounce around all over the place. Verticality, I think about that a lot. Layers, I like. So let's say I have a duplex, right? Or I have if this is a dream place, like, this is going to be like a 4-story building for myself. I have it like looping in and of itself, where it just like zigzags around, going all the way up to the top floor. And each floor has a different layout, and I have like a glass roof. This is what I would want, just to allow natural light to flow in from the top, and then feed it into like the bottom of the building. I mean, like, I mean, this is probably gonna.
It's definitely not legal to do that, is it? Like when you're building a house, because I know there's like lots of hearing from people who have built houses, or people, and also people who have tried to build houses.
Yeah.
Like.
No, if you're talking about money being a non-issue,
there's like a lot of red tape and shit, like legally when you're building a house, which I had no idea about. But yeah, like even if you buy land, right, and you try to build a house there, like there's literally so many fucking rules that you need a whole like other life to like deal with it.
Dude, like there's a building project that I was in charge of where like because of the red tape, it didn't even start production yet, and I've done the designs for this for 3 years now.
It's kind of crazy because like, oh, go ahead.
No, and like that's pretty much like how it always is. I hate construction for this reason alone, because like there's a lot of bureaucracy involved, and things just don't happen because of that bureaucracy. Or like things do happen, but it's after a long period of time, and you've already moved on to new things by that point. And I like animation because animation's fast.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I hate brutalist architecture. Like, I really don't like it when buildings and like community centers have brutalist architecture, like really simple, just plain gray like cement and like glass, and they're just like a big box. But the funny thing is, my own dream house would look like that. It would just be like a long gray rectangle, basically, which is all the rooms in a line, and like and just really high ceilings, like, and just glass on like one side, like floor to ceiling windows on one side of it, and then the other side is just concrete, and it's just like a long rectangle. I think that would be fucking sick. Like I've thought about that, and I've like, I don't know, I'm not an architect. I don't know anything about architecture, but
No, it's
I've done like
doable.
doodles of it. For some reason, I would like to live in a very simplified house like that, but I don't know. I guess for like just when I'm looking at it, I like older architecture. Typically, like globally, like there's really sick architecture, but it's ancient in like China and Japan and stuff like that. Like that's, I mean, that goes, dude. Ancient
Hmm.
Asian architecture goes fucking hard, bro.
Oh,
Like
dude,
you
no,
can't.
just
I don't think anyone can deny that. Like,
just on the sense of like the woods, like the way how they interlock joints and everything on how buildings are built, like the engineering that goes into like Eastern architecture is very very interesting, and they teach you a lot of that in like architecture school here in the States too. Just like you learn how to make like particular joints work whenever you're building models, and it's just there's a lot of that sensibility nowadays, even like in modern architecture. My personal favorite mode and style is actually 70s Italian architecture, 60s and 70s Italian architecture. You get like a really cool like communal. I'm thinking about like cities that at the time. You get a lot of like very cool communal hubs where everything about the designs of buildings is just promoting people existing outside of the building. So you have a lot of like balconies. You have a lot of uh, what's the word? Fountains, foyers, a lot of just interaction with the building on the exterior, on top of the interior of the building, and it's kind of romantic in a way. It's very you're not incentivized to be a singular person living in your own place. You're expected to like hang outside your patio or like hang outside the balcony and like talk with your neighbors or like people across the street, and you get a lot of that sensibility in Europe at that time period. Eastern Europe also follows a lot of that similar sensibility. Communal architecture, which I think is like very romantic. The problem is those buildings are impossible to like take care of, and they kind of go to hell really quickly because like it's very expensive to keep those buildings like prim and proper, but it has this romance to it despite that. But
I
yeah.
really like religious buildings, like like
Oh
Gothic cathedrals,
yeah,
and
my
like even like temples in like Iran and like
mhm.
Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. Like
Mosques, yeah.
that kind of yeah, that kind of stuff is like always incredible when I see it. I like that it's like, I don't know, it has a kind of a uniform like style, but like I I draw a lot. I've been drawing a lot of recently a lot of like, I guess like, yeah, like Gothic churches like
Hmm.
with like the really long like spike going up. I think that
Yeah,
just those
the
spikes,
spires, yeah.
yeah, pointing up at the sky, it just looks fucking so sick.
Yeah, my
I like
dream,
it a
like
lot.
my architectural dream, like this is how I know I'll be fulfilled as an architect is if I design like a church or a cathedral, and like once I do that, then like I've made it. If I can say I designed a cathedral, that means like I've made it as an architect. I'm like one of the classics, like one of the masters.
Right, because it's so like I can't. It's one of those things where I can't imagine. It's awe inspiring, and that's one of the things that I like. That's one of the things recently that has made me like want to take art even more seriously is like that sense of awe when you look at a piece of art and you're like, bro, how the fuck did a human do this?
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean? Like how you're actually not comprehending like even getting to a point where you could do something like that. Like I mean, definitely get that sense when you're in a church, a really nice church.
hmm
It's like, whoa, man, holy shit.
there.
There's a nice church around near where my mom lives, and she took me to see it, and I was in it, and it wasn't. I live in a city. My mom lives in like a rural area, and
Hmm.
so the churches in the city are kind of bullshit. Like the buildings are just not impressive. But where my mom lives, it's a more rural area, and they have a really big church, and it's not a mega church. It's like an old ancient style church, and the it looks ancient, but it's mind-boggling, like walking through it. And it's meant to be that way, and it's meant to like inspire. It's meant to elevate your spirit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, I mean, like, speaking as an architect, you do a lot of research when it comes to what you want a building to be, and I especially like it in churches because, like, people that have designed churches and, like, religious buildings in the past, like, I'm talking about like over hundreds of years ago, they thought a lot about how people interact with that space. That's the beauty of architecture. This is why I love architecture. This is why I'm always going to be passionate about architecture, even if I'm not pursuing it, as a career. Architecture is all about how humans interact with space. It will always be about how humans interact with space. And even if it's just humans observing space, it's always about the human eye that's looking into it. And there's a beauty to it because, like, you're trying to get into people's heads. When you're designing something, you're thinking about how people are going to interact with this place and how you're expecting them to move around there and how you're expecting people to, like, look at different areas. And I borrow all of my compositional theory from what I learned in architecture, and it overlaps with a lot of things in life. Whenever I'm entering a new space, I'm always looking at, like, how is this place designed? What's the feng shui? What am I expected to look at whenever I'm entering a space, or how am I expected to move around? And there is a hand behind that. There is a human's guiding hand throughout any space that you make or you go through. Interior design also follows this same theory of logic, where it's just like, how do you put things in a space to move people around? And I think it's valuable to think about things that way. It's just like, and this is how I handle art. How do I want people to look at a piece? How do I want their eyes to move around? And comics is beautiful in that sense too, because paneling is all that. It's just, where are you looking? Why are you looking here? And that's what I do. So yeah, that's to bring the whole conversation back around to, like, how does architecture play into, like, my art? That's pretty much it.
You're are you still doing that, or like is it usually what what I actually want to know is, like, is it on like commercial buildings, or what is it on, like the ones that you have done,
Oh,
like
I made a
like with
gallery in Harlem a little
mm,
while ago. Like, I designed a gallery, and what was the street name? It was Harlem 123rd Street. What happening was it? This was a long time ago. This was like over like 7 years ago. This is like the thing that I'm currently most proud of, because, like, it's like a traditional type of gallery. Because I did a lot of research for that one, and I designed a whole, like, light flow where the top floor is the most bright area, and as you go down, you get, like, dimmer and dimmer throughout the building, and the more, like, older pieces are on the bottom floor with the lights dimmer, and the more modernist sculptures are on the top floor where light bounces more naturally. And I was very proud of the way how I thought about that one.
That's
I
really sick, man. I have another friend who actually used to do architecture. She doesn't anymore, but I have a friend who used to do architecture professionally, and I remember thinking that was so, I don't know, I was just impressed with it, because I thought about drawing, and I thought, wow, you've made like a building that's standing, and I remember when I met, there was one of the teachers. I didn't like a lot of the teachers when I went to art school, but one of them was an architect, and he was like actually nice to me and was really cool. And yeah, I was just like blown away. Like he showed me like a plan that he made for a community center, I think, that got built, and I went and like looked at it, and I was like, that's, I don't know, to me that's like fucking hectic to do that. Like that's a different sense of accomplishment. It's something. It's really different. I even just going and spray painting on a wall, or like
Mhm.
tagging a wall in real life,
Tons of
I
fun.
found that
I love that.
yeah, I found that when I finally tried to do that, that's such a totally different thing than drawing on paper or on a
Yep,
computer.
yep,
Like,
yep, yep.
it's completely fucking different.
I
And
actually want to get into mural work by like
yeah,
spray painting. That's something that I want to actually branch into personally. Like, just do that type of
definitely
stuff.
try it if if you haven't like if you've never done that. Like, because I remember I really liked graffiti when I was a kid, but I never tried it until I was an adult because it's just really fucking hard. First of all, you have to go and buy or like you have to go get.
Just as a disclaimer, kids, don't do graffiti. It's vandalism. It's a work of vandalism, but it's also art and it's also fucking sick. But like,
Yeah, I mean,
just don't do it.
if you go somewhere where it doesn't matter as much,
Yeah.
where what you're spray painting on doesn't matter as much, like the typical rules like that everyone knows is don't do it somewhere people live and don't do it on cars.
Yeah.
Like, do not do that shit. There's other places that, particularly on commercial buildings and especially on advertisements, where morally it's a lot more excusable. You know, like
Yeah.
if it's just if it's like an advertisement that's like temporary, like yeah, it's a different story. But like what I'm talking about is like the physical act of like holding down the button on a spray paint can and
Yes.
moving
Yeah.
your whole body and having like and keeping the same distance between the can's nozzle and the wall itself.
Yep.
And like
To get a
all the
consistent
little
line. Yep. Yep. Yep.
yeah. All the little aspects of that is like, dude, it's like literally another world. Like I'll be totally honest. I suck. Like I still suck with spray paint cans. Like I've tried to do a few like throw ups,
Mm-hmm.
and I've done tags with cans. But like once I start, the throw ups weren't even good. Like it was just like, okay, this is basically a totally new skill. Like it has almost very little to like if you're real good at drawing like on paper or digitally and you try and do that shit in real life, no man, it's completely different.
Yeah.
I wanted to, but it's like at this point, the shit that I'm trying to do, I had to decide like, okay, I can like I can draw in like pens. I can do like paint pens and shit like that, just every now and then. But doing serious like spray painting and graffiti and even like large paintings in real life is like I'm not. I don't think that
It's its own
much in
medium
my
and art form. But yeah.
exactly.
The time now is pretty late at night. We're actually gonna have to call the show right now. But for everybody that was just tuning in, this was Fangdangler / Lamb of God Studio on Twitter, and I
Yeah, I
highly
really
recommend.
really appreciate you having me on, man. Thank you.
No, you've been a wonderful
Really good
guest.
talking.
Really good. Like, it's always great talking with you, and I hope like maybe in the future you can come back on the show sooner or later. But with that, we're signing off. Adios, amigos. Okay.